All right, get ready to dive into the world of web development. We've got some really interesting articles about front end and back end development, and honestly, it can feel like a whole new language sometimes.
It's pretty amazing what goes on behind the scenes of the websites we use every day, right?
Yeah,
And you're right, there's a lot of jargon.
for sure. One of the articles actually described it like a play, which I thought was a really clever way to put it. Front end development is all that you see the design, the layout, the interactive elements. It's like the performance itself.
Yeah, I like that. And just like any good play, there's a whole team working behind the curtain to make that magic happen, and that's where the back end comes in.
Right. So it's like, front end is the actors and the set design, and back end is all the lighting and sound effects and stagehands, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the articles even mentioned that a single vulnerability in the back end could lead to a major data breach, so it's definitely not a role for the faint of heart.
Oh, wow. That's a little unnerving when you put it that way, but it makes you realize how important both sides are. It's like a website with only front end development would be like, I don't know, a gorgeous storefront with absolutely nothing on the shelves.
Exactly. You might be initially drawn in, but you'll quickly leave disappointed if there's no substance behind the facade. So how do these developers actually build these websites? What tools do they use? Your sources highlighted a few key languages, right?
Yeah, they did. And it seems like there are different languages for the front end and back end.
Absolutely. On the front end, it starts with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Okay, those sound familiar, but I have to admit, I don't really know what they do. It's like, I know they're important, but
Right. So think of HTML as the basic building blocks of a web page. It's like the foundation and framework of a house.
so it's like the skeleton of the website then, providing the basic structure.
Exactly. Then you have CSS, and that's all about style. It controls things like colors, fonts, layout, basically everything that contributes to the look and feel of a website.
Ah, okay, so it's like the interior designer of the web, making sure everything looks visually appealing.
I like that analogy. And then there's JavaScript, which is a bit more active, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. JavaScript sounds more like, well, action.
Yes. JavaScript is what brings a website to life. It handles all the dynamic and interactive elements like, remember that time you were trying to book a flight online and that drop-down menu just wouldn't work?
Ugh, don't remind me. It was infuriating.
Well, that's JavaScript for you. Or, rather, a front-end developer probably pulling their hair out trying to fix that JavaScript code.
So it's like all those cool features that make a website actually engaging to use, all those interactive elements, that's JavaScript.
Yep, and that's just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Your sources also mention more advanced frameworks and libraries like React and Angular, which are built on JavaScript.
Frameworks and libraries. So it's like having a basic set of tools with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then these frameworks are like more specialized tools that you can use to build even more complex things.
Precisely. They provide pre-built components and structures that can streamline the development process. Think of it like this. If you're building a house, you could make every single brick by hand, or you could use pre-made bricks to speed things up.
Ah, that makes sense. So it's all about working smarter, not harder.
And that's what frameworks like React and Angular allow front-end developers to do. It frees them up to focus on creating those really seamless, user-friendly experiences we were talking about.
So it sounds like front-end development requires a unique blend of technical skills, but also creativity and a good eye for design.
Absolutely. It's where technology meets artistry. But speaking of technology, let's delve into the world of back-end development, where things get a bit more technical.
Okay, so we've explored the front end, the part of the website we see and interact with. But now let's go behind the scenes into the world of back-end development. It's all a bit more mysterious back here.
You could say that. It's like the engine room of a ship. You might not see it, but it's what keeps everything running.
I like that analogy. So while I'm busy clicking buttons and admiring the design, there's a whole other world making sure everything actually works the way it's supposed to.
Exactly. Back-end development is all about the behind-the-scenes functionality, databases, servers, user authentication, and much more.
It sounds complicated, and it probably takes a different set of tools and languages than what we talked about with front-end development, right?
It does. While front-end focuses on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, back-end developers use a variety of languages like Python, Java, and Ruby, to name a few.
Okay, I've definitely heard of Python. It seems like everyone's talking about it these days. Why is it so popular, especially for back-end development?
Python is known for being incredibly versatile and relatively easy to learn, even for beginners. Plus, it has a very active and supportive community, which is always a plus when you're learning a new language.
So it's like the jack of all trades of programming languages. You can use it for pretty much anything.
Pretty much. It's great for data analysis, machine learning, and of course, web development, especially on the back end.
And what about Java? I've heard that one used in a lot of different contexts.
Java is often the go-to for building large, complex systems, like those used by banks and other financial institutions. It's known for its stability and security, which are obviously crucial in those industries.
Makes sense. It's like
Yep.
you wouldn't want your banking app crashing every 5 minutes.
Exactly. You need a language that's reliable and can handle a lot of data and transactions simultaneously.
And then we have Ruby. I'll admit, I don't know as much about that one.
Ruby is interesting. It's known for its elegant syntax, meaning it's relatively easy to read and write, even for complex tasks. It's often favored by startups and for building web applications that need to be developed quickly.
So it's like, depending on the project and its specific needs, back-end developers choose the language that's the best fit.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach in back-end development. It's all about selecting the right tools for the job.
So it's not just about knowing the languages, right? What other skills do you need to be a successful back-end developer?
Oh, absolutely. Problem solving is key. Back-end developers often need to think critically and creatively to solve complex technical challenges.
So it's like being a detective, but instead of solving crimes, you're solving coding mysteries.
Exactly. You need to be able to analyze data, identify patterns, and troubleshoot issues effectively.
And what about security? That seems like a huge part of back-end development, especially with all the data breaches we hear about these days.
Security is absolutely paramount. Back-end developers play a critical role in protecting user data and ensuring systems are secure from vulnerabilities.
It's a lot of responsibility, but it also sounds incredibly important and rewarding, knowing that you're building systems that people rely on every single day. So we've got our front-end developers creating beautiful and engaging websites, and our back-end developers making sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes.
It's the perfect combination. But what about those who can do both? Have you heard of full-stack developers?
I have, and it sounds pretty impressive. It's like they can speak both languages fluently, front-end and back-end.
That's a great way to put it. Full-stack developers have a comprehensive understanding of both sides of web development.
That must make them incredibly valuable, right? Like, they can handle a project from start to finish.
Absolutely. They're like the Swiss Army knives of the web development world.
So they can design the look and feel of a website and also build the complex systems that power it.
Exactly. And they understand how those two sides interact and work together seamlessly.
It sounds almost too good to be true. Are there any downsides to being a full-stack developer?
Well, one potential challenge is that you need to stay up to date on a wider range of technologies, which can be demanding. The field is constantly evolving.
That's true for both front-end and back-end development, though, right? It seems like if you want to work in web development, you need to be comfortable with constant learning.
Absolutely. The tech world moves fast, and you need to be adaptable and always willing to expand your skill set.
It sounds both challenging and exciting at the same time, but it seems like there's this clear distinction between front-end and back-end. Is that always the case? I mean, one of the articles you sent mentioned something called single-page applications or SPAs, and it sounded like those were blurring the lines a bit. So tell me more about these SPAs. It sounds like they're changing the way websites are built.
Yeah, they're definitely shaking things up. They're blurring the lines between front-end and back-end in some interesting ways.
Okay, so remind me again, what exactly is a single-page application?
Sure, so think about a traditional website. Every time you click a link or navigate to a new page, the entire page reloads, right? It's like you're starting from scratch each time.
Right, and sometimes that can be slow, even with a fast internet connection, especially if you have to keep re-entering information or logging in.
Exactly. But with an SPA, the whole application loads on a single page, and then content is dynamically updated as needed. It's more like a native app in that way.
So it's like the page itself is a stage, and instead of changing the entire set for each scene, you're just swapping out the actors and props.
That's a great way to put it. And this makes for a much smoother, more responsive user experience.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing JavaScript plays a big role in making this all happen.
It does. SPAs rely heavily on JavaScript running in the user's browser to handle all those dynamic updates, fetching data from the back end as needed.
So it sounds like front-end developers working on SPAs need to have a pretty good grasp of back-end concepts, too.
Yeah, the lines are definitely blurring. And that brings us to APIs, which are essential for both front-end and back-end development, especially with the rise of cloud computing. Speaking of which, did any of your sources delve into that world?
They did, but I'll admit cloud computing always seems a bit nebulous to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things that can feel very abstract until you really wrap your head around it.
So what is cloud computing in a nutshell?
Basically, instead of companies having to manage their own physical servers and data centers, they can rent space on these massive, powerful servers owned by companies like Amazon or Microsoft. It's like going from owning a car to using a ride-sharing service to get where you need to go, but without all the hassle of maintenance and upkeep.
So it's more efficient and probably more cost-effective for many businesses.
Exactly. And these cloud platforms offer all sorts of pre-built tools and services that developers can use, making their lives a lot easier.
So instead of having to reinvent the wheel every time, developers can use these cloud-based tools to speed up the development process.
Precisely. And because these cloud platforms offer APIs, which allow different applications to communicate with each other, it really opens up a lot of possibilities for collaboration.
I see. So front-end developers can easily connect their user interfaces to back-end systems hosted in the cloud.
Exactly. And back-end developers can focus on building and maintaining those systems without having to worry as much about the front-end side of things.
It's like they each have their own areas of expertise, but they're working together more seamlessly than ever before.
Exactly. And this collaborative approach is becoming increasingly important in web development, especially as websites and applications continue to grow in complexity.
So it sounds like the future of web development is all about breaking down silos and working together more closely.
Absolutely. And to thrive in this environment, developers need to be adaptable, lifelong learners, always willing to pick up new skills and embrace new technologies.
Which brings us to those in-demand skills you mentioned earlier. What are some of the things aspiring web developers should be focusing on?
Well, on the front end, mastering those JavaScript frameworks like React and Angular is definitely a good move.
And what about on the back end? What skills are in high demand there?
Aside from a strong command of languages like Python or Java, expertise in APIs, cloud platforms like AWS or Azure, and of course security, are all highly sought-after skills.
Security, yeah, that's something we've touched on throughout this entire deep dive. It's clearly a top priority in the world of web development.
For good reason. As we entrust more and more of our lives to the digital world, ensuring that data is protected is absolutely crucial.
Well, this has been a fascinating journey behind the scenes of the web. I'm going to look at websites with a whole new appreciation now.
Me too. It's easy to take all that complexity for granted, but there's a whole lot of creativity, ingenuity, and hard work that goes into building the websites and applications we use every day.
It's a hidden world that most of us don't even think about, but it's what powers so much of our modern lives. So, next time you're browsing online, take a moment to appreciate not just the sleek design or the cool features, but also the invisible army of code and the talented developers who make it all possible.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating field that's constantly evolving, and who knows, maybe our conversation today will inspire some listeners to embark on their own web development adventures.